So I'm not the founding father of Mix. This was a team effort, and a great team effort. I have great recollections of the time when we were working on the Mix proposal and, trying to get it funded and so on. And then, lots of people from Zurich, from EPFL and other places worked together very hard, and collectively, I think we came up with an interesting project, okay, which I'll briefly review actually. In a minute. Now, in which perspective I'll talk here, that was a difficult one, right? Because when I was asked to talk here, I thought, I can sort of guess, The minute it was announced I would be going to the Fonds National, I got so many new friends, right? People sending me emails, asking me to visit research centers I had never heard of. I would, encounter people that would give me their business cards and so on. The good news is that I know exactly when I lose these friends, right? It's exactly 4 years later. So, of course, I'm quite, I've seen these things happen, right? Okay, so here, the interesting thing, 11 years of Mix, I saw it from many different perspectives, so that's what I'm going to try to do. And so here we go. So I'll tell you a little bit about the history. I don't want to be too long about this, but thanks to Jacques Beauvais, the man behind a lot of the things we have been doing, he recovered the original slides presented to the National Science Foundation. So we have the original ones, these sort of acetate foils, yellowed and so on, right, by age, where we can see what we promised, okay? It's actually very interesting because, at the end I come to, what should the SNF look at? Well, the SNF should actually look at the original slides. They should not look at what we sell now. They should actually look at what we said, and they should say, okay, is this team actually delivered or didn't deliver, okay? So that I'll let you judge after we have seen the slides actually of what we promised. So that will be the story of Mix. I call these the slides from the bubble years because we did this exactly in the middle of the internet bubble. And that was an interesting time to do it because we were very optimistic. But in the end, nobody pulled the plug of the internet, right? And so the bubble sort of, the big part, sort of went away. It's like Facebook, right? Okay, if you were silly enough to buy Facebook stock on the initial public offering, just half of it got wiped away. But Facebook is not going to go away, right? Facebook is going to probably pass 1 billion users pretty soon, right? They're at 950 million. Not bad, right? And so even though if their stock isn't that great as, the pirates on Wall Street, made it to be, I think Facebook is there to stay as well as all the rest of the, social network bubble. Okay. So 12 years later, I'll make a few comments about this. What have we really achieved? I think we've achieved a lot, and you could see it here today during these 2 days in the various presentations. I'll make a few comments about things maybe we could have done even better, right? Because it's maybe a lesson for other things we might try to do. And I'll make comments because, as Carl said, then I moved to administration, unfortunately. But then I had a view of Mix seen from, let's say, central administration, or now as a dean of the School of Computer and Communication Sciences. What does a center, an interdisciplinary center, mean for an academic system? And I'll make some comments about this. And of course, everybody wants to know what I think as a guy who's going to do even more administration in Bern. And this I'm not going to tell you, okay? So I'll tell you on 1st of January. But I'll make a few comments now as a private citizen, right? Paying taxes in Switzerland, what I think, right? On 1st of January, I'll have to, I'll have another hat. And then, actually, the initial talk, I was asked to talk about the future of ICT. That was the initial plan. And I looked at the title, I said, isn't there a flagship project at ETH called Future ICT? So why would I tell you about this, right? ETH has all the answers, right? It's called Future ICT. So I'm just going to give you a few thoughts about how people from our community think about problems and why, it's actually a good thing to think about more problems using the tools that we master and that we have used here in Mix. Okay, so that's your way. Okay, so this was the initial slide. We promised that we would solve the multi-party, multimedia, everything communication problem, right? Everybody was thinking about this. Remember, that's year 2000, right? It's May 17th, year, of 2000, the famous year 2000. And okay, everybody wanted this. It was clear that that had to be done. And we said, that was also the time of UMTS, a time when, again, the bandits on Wall Street were selling bandwidth, essentially, you know, or telecom operators were buying bandwidth for, you know, for billions and billions. And it was fixed heavy infrastructure, very evolutionary stuff, not extremely exciting from an academic point of view, from an industrial point of view. This was, of course, the thing to do. Okay. And so we came and we said, and that was an idea and the names that Jean-Pierre Hugo brought back from a sabbatical, I think, at Berkeley. It's a place where everything gets invented, which was, okay, an idea that had been floating around, at least, let's say, not commercial systems, but military systems since the 60s, which was to do self-organized systems. Now, of course, it's all the rage, but in year 2000, there were just a few people thinking about this, and there was a group at Berkeley, the people that did tiny node and so on. And so we started thinking about this, and the question was, of course, can you do this, etc. So we had nice animations, okay, and you know, is this good, is this bad, and so on. And you know, then we discovered, of course, that I always remember doing this presentation at Swisscom, okay, in Bern, trying to get them into the industrial liaison program. And so, you know, I was on this slide and I said, you know, this is great, right, because you won't need an operator. And there was a silence in the room, okay, as you can guess. Anyway, so that was the Swisscom story. So then we changed the slide. We said, no, 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 you know, we can do this in addition, right? And actually, that's of course what is happening. You don't, you know, take out the fiber optic cables. You actually add it with stuff like sensor networks. Okay, all right. And you know, we already had. I looked at the slides. I checked with Jacques. I said, so we are talking about sensor networks in year 2000. That was, you know, actually a nice thing to do. We had all these, you know, crazy ideas. We had no solutions, but we had good questions, I think. And the questions had to do, for example, with scaling, right? Will this scale to 1 million nodes, for example? Will it be secure, distributed trust? Quality of service was obvious, right? What kind of software? Can it lead to new business model? Very interesting, right? And so we claimed it was going to be the next big thing, right? And it raises fundamental questions. We heard many answers to these questions. We also said that some of these questions were very hard, and maybe we wouldn't solve them, but they were good questions to pursue, okay? And the technology also was very interesting. It was forefront of R&D, and we said, that's funny, right? These topics will be as relevant as now as in 10 years. Okay, in 10 years they will be as relevant as they are in year 2000. We are year 2012, and all these things are very relevant, right? Okay, so I don't know who made these slides, but that was a good set of slides. I know who made them, Jacques. Thank you very much. Okay, good. So where did we go from there? I'm not going to review all the achievements, but I'll just point out a few things. In the beginning, we invested a lot in theory. For various reasons. I mean, fundamentally, that's where you have to start. And also, we had we have a very strong theory crew. We had results on capacity of multi-terminal networks, something that had obsessed information theories for a long time. And now I think some of the best results are actually results that are attached to Mix and the group of people working here. We had these results that Olivier Douce presented yesterday on percolation. That was one example of interdisciplinary work, right? We talked to the people in the math department, probabilists, Gérard Benarous. He sort of looked at this problem and said, oh, you have to study percolation, right? And so, you know, people went, studied percolation, got very interesting results. Things on routing and synchronization, distributed synchronization, very interesting work in various groups. With fundamental bounds, new self-organized systems, and so on. Fun stuff. Stuff on data management, big data came out because we had sensor networks, right? And big data was certainly not an issue in year 2000. I think the word didn't really exist. But you know, by the mere fact of collecting all that stuff, people started to think about this, database people, software engineering people, and so on. The PermaSense project we heard about this morning, and so on. Okay. The interdisciplinary side, I'll come back to this. So you heard a lot this morning. It was a very nice session on the Swiss experiment, something where we convinced the environmental scientists in Switzerland to join together, raise money together to actually do environmental monitoring using this, you know, state-of-the-art technology. And it was not easy. I went to some meetings which were just surrealistic, right? But in the end, it was done, and the technology was deployed, and the people got excited about the results that could be produced by this. Okay? And about tech transfer, we heard about it just in the previous session, so let me skip that one. Okay, so those of you who know me, you know, I try to, I'm the guy asking questions, right? I don't like to go around and just say we have all the answers. So is there something which could have been done better? There is one thing that I still hope we would develop more in Switzerland in general, and at EPFL in particular, which is what I call the Berkeley spirit. Sorry for the Stanford people in the room, but the Berkeley spirit is the one of a public school that is the underdog when it comes to, you know, endowment, etc., but that can band together and work very hard as a group, as a team, you know, to get the next project started. And we have some of the Berkeley spirit. We certainly had a lot of it when we launched Mix, but then, you know, we sort of all go our own ways and so on, and sometimes it gets a little bit lost. I think we should come back here to the origins. We should be able today to, you know, band together and go for the next big thing just as we did, okay? We saw a lot of interesting startups. I'm not sure we have the Google or Foursquare or Facebook in the making, but that has to do a little bit with general spirit in Europe and the risk-taking attitudes that we have and so on. I think there is enough technology, there are a lot of smart people and so on, but you know, the Silicon Valley spirit cannot be reinvented somewhere else. We have to find another model to be able to grow companies in a more aggressive way. Here is a point that I feel very strongly about, right? And I feel strongly about both as a member of these communities, as general computer science, communication science community, but also as having, you know, been involved maybe too much in academic politics, is that we essentially do not produce high-impact publications. Okay? So I'm sorry, again, for the information theorists in the room. They think high-impact publication is something in the green transactions, right? And I have, you know, a bunch of these, and that's very nice. But the high-impact publication is something that gets attention, very broad attention, that addresses, you know, a broad public of scientists or science-oriented people, that is in a journal that has an impact factor of 25 or 30, that gets media coverage, etc. And this we don't know how to do, okay? I mean, there have been a little bit here and there, but, you know, if this center was one in life sciences or it was one in physics, we would have had this long list of nature and science papers, right? And that's essentially what, you know, the NCCR would be selling back to the Fonds National. You know, they would say, we published whatever, but look, we produced nature and science papers, right? We don't produce nature and science paper, and one reason is that we don't have nature and science, right? And if you try nature and science, they are owned by the life science people and by the physicists. Sorry for the physicists and the life science people, and they make sure the sort of stuff we do does not get published in Nature and Science, right? Unless you are Dieter Schoen at Bell Labs inventing, you know, new materials that don't exist, it's very hard to enter there. And so I think that's a problem we have to solve. IEEE, let me be open, I'm a member, a long-time member, does not serve us well as an intellectual community. ACM does a little bit better, but plays a very different game. The net effect is that, and I looked at the numbers, right? And we have interesting numbers, and, you know, there are some papers that had impact and so on. But globally, with respect to what we have achieved, we are nowhere there in terms of impact with what we could have if we were served properly by our home technical societies in terms of publication. More on this at some later point or overview. Okay, so then there is another thing that I'm very curious about, is that in some sense, the people here, network engineers, computer scientists, information theorists, so on, have invented a new microscope, right? A new device that allows to see things which have never been seen before. And we sort of say, oh yes, that was cute, and, you know, what is a Hamiltonian path in this, you know, network and so on, and we walk on to some other things. We should say, no, we have invented the new microscope. We should run with it, right? And to some extent we have tried to do it, but it's not easy, because in the end, you know, you lose control over this because you give it to other communities and so on. I think we underestimate the potential of inventing new instruments. And that has also to do with that typically we don't do experimental work that much, right? Or we don't go all the way. Let's say the physicists, you know, they promise you something, then they raise $10 billion, then they do a 5 sigma analysis and they say, oh, here is a Higgs boson, right? $10 billion later, right? And we don't do this, right? We sort of do one piece, another piece, we move on, we have fun, etc., right? And I think there we also have to learn how to potentially play differently. All right, so I looked at the great achievements, okay? So this was the, you know, questions here is a great achievement. I looked at the H factor of mix. If you're into bibliometry, you know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, don't even look at it. And the H factor of mix is 106. Now, 106 is quite good, because I know my own H factor, which I'm not going to tell you. And you know, this was done just in 10 years, right? And I've been longer at this game than 10 years. And so 106 is very nice, okay? Congratulations. That's on Google, right? I'm afraid on the Web of Science we are a little bit less visible, but this is very good, okay? I think the academic impact is tremendous. To have graduated close to 300 PhDs on these topics, to have them, you know, gone through demanding programs with exposure to interdisciplinary topics and so on is fantastic. These people go out in the real world, you know, 10% of them, and that should be a larger number, have become academics, so I hope this will go up over time, usually it does. This will have a tremendous influence over time, and this is really the real transfer of knowledge that has been done by MIX, and this is fantastic. Industrial impact, we have heard some of it, and I think it is happening. It might not be happening as fast as we would like to, and I'll come back to this in a quote by a former colleague. I mentioned startups, so let me not say this. Let me just quote Stonebreaker. He says, you know, I want to see my ideas go into the real world. If you approach a large company with your idea, the chances of it getting picked up aren't high. Okay, if you have tried, you know what I mean. Large companies have a very strong NIH syndrome. It's very hard to come with an interesting idea, self-organized networks, walk over to Cisco to just pick the 800-pound gorilla, and Cisco says, oh, we have never thought about it. Oh, of course, we're going to investigate and develop and so on. Absolutely not, right? Cisco is going to wait about, you know, half a dozen years until there is a $1 billion company that does self-organized networks and will buy it, okay? Therefore, the best way to see your idea through is a startup. I specialize in disruptive technologies. Startups are great for that, okay? So Mike Stonebreaker is behind, I think, 7 companies around the database space and very, very successful. Okay, good. So what does this all mean for academia? So I changed my hats. That was, you know, looking at MIX and being a participant in MIX and having fun. There is a word of warning here. Interdisciplinary work is hard work, and I would not recommend it to get tenure at any top-notch university. And it's interesting because I started my career as a junior academic at an Ivy League school where we had an engineering research center, which is essentially the same thing. And I remember the review teams, the panels, coming from Washington to New York City and telling the department head, oh, you know, with this interdisciplinary stuff, you should change the way you evaluate people for tenure. And, you know, the people at Columbia was the place, you know, typical Ivy League snobbishness said, well, you are not going to tell us how we evaluate for tenure, right? They were extremely clear. And in some sense, we have the same attitude here, okay? And there is no choice, because we have, as academics, as institutions, as departments, we have another game to play, right? Which is the ranking game and the positioning and so on. And for better or worse, I'm not defending what is happening. I'm just being very pragmatic in observing how this game is played. To get tenure, you have to do disciplinary work, right? And I think we should be very careful not to tell young people the wrong message, okay? That, you know, of course, do this thing where you talk to lawyers and this and that, and, you know, it will be interesting and so on. I mean, there are very few people that can survive this while doing interdisciplinary work, right? Okay, so traditional departments have a very hard time. Large centers are not easy to handle on a campus. I don't know how it went this morning when you had, you know, the review with the central management and so on, but I know we had some pretty stressful meetings because central management doesn't like these sort of mini EPFLs, right? I mean, here we were running something, 100 million, it's not bad, right? It's across Switzerland, it has a different network and so on, and Central didn't like this very much, right? I mean, we were not on the radar screen of Central because Central wanted to do X, right? And we wanted to do Y, and we had the means actually to do it, okay. And, but of course NSF comes here, Swiss NSF, and says, oh, but you know, we want to have impact on the structure of the campus, right? Well, tell Elisher that you want to have impact on his structure, right? So, tough luck, right? Well, we'll see next year. So, okay, so tenure. So tenure is a very difficult one, but as I said, it's all about governance. And here is an interesting question. It goes a little bit beyond what you want to hear before an apéro. But you know, there is a governance question here which is not clearly solved. And there are other programs actually run, be it by Swiss NSF or by the EU or by US NSF, where there is an interference between academic governance on the campus and you know, what the tools that the funding agency put in place are actually trying to achieve, right? I don't think this has been clearly thought of. People have a great idea, you know, money always helps to push great ideas, but in the end, if the governance doesn't follow, you're going to have accidents, right? And this, of course, does happen. All right. What does it mean for academic research? That's more fundamental. So, by coincidence, I was reading this short piece by Poincaré about mathematical creation. He makes some interesting points. He says, it does not consist in making new combinations, right? Because there is an infinite number of them, and most of them are completely without interest, right? And let me warn you, some academic research is about making infinite number of combinations, not all of them of high interest. But he says something interesting. Among chosen combinations, the most fertile will often be those formed of elements drawn from domains which are far apart. He was talking about math, right? But you can apply this more generally to quantitative sciences. So certain about them, very rare, are the most fruitful of all. And this I truly believe, okay? Even though I said, you know, junior academics should be risk averse in terms of doing interdisciplinary research, I think for senior people that have sort of stable position and so on, it's extremely interesting to go that route, okay? Because the next big thing will probably happen at the boundary between traditional domains, okay? And if senior people that have the leisure to do it don't do it, nothing's going to happen there. Okay, the action is at the boundary, it's actually fun. You saw the picture from Valferre where we would go with Bach-Palange, but it takes a long time to cross these boundaries, and it's not easy to communicate with other communities and to align interests, okay? All right, so what does it mean for SNF? Okay, so that's the thing that gives me nightmares, right? This picture I see in, you know, the middle of the night, what is it? It is the 800 million question, which is how the Swiss National Science Foundation spends its money. And what's interesting here is that 50%, exactly half of it, goes to so-called single investigator grants, okay? Now, if you ask me what made my career, if ever, you know, something has made it, it's single investigator grants, right? It's the US NSF single investigator grants that I got, the ones I got in Switzerland, the ERC I got, and so on. It is not, you know, center money and interdisciplinary resistance, right? Okay, it's only 50%, right? And you can see careers is the next piece here, 21%. This one is programs, right? And then CCRs are here. And for a while they grew quite rapidly because they're very popular with politicians, with the public, you know, and so-called directed research, right? I mean, you take an example, very current example in Switzerland is energy research. Okay, so let me take 30 seconds because it's really important. So, you know, we heard about Fukushima. In Europe, you had Germany getting out of nuclear power very quickly, right? And then Switzerland reacting and saying, oh, yeah, me too, right? And then, you know, why not? I mean, I'm agnostic about the issue, by the way, okay? I'm not taking position about the issue. I'm discussing how it was done, right? And so, you know, next thing you hear is that there will be hundreds of millions spent on energy research, right? So, of course, I already have to you know, participate in such things. So I'm sitting there in a meeting in Bern, right? And I'm told, okay, we're going to give 40 assistant professors tenure track funded by the National Science Foundation on energy research, right? Alternative energy research, of course, right? Because we want to get out of nuclear. And so I'm sitting there, I tell them, look, these people don't grow on trees. They probably don't exist, right? And I tell them, the time you should have done this was very simple. It's actually easy to know when they should have done it. It's 1973, first oil shock. You knew that the Western world, the way it was growing, was going to run into a wall, right? But nobody did anything, right? There was no substantial energy research for the last 40 years. There was a little bit just, you know, to pretend, and now all of a sudden we should invent this, right? And all of you know research is very long-term investment. It's essentially a generation, right? Because you have to convince people to choose a career in a certain domain, you know, to put all their effort, their energy put their career on the line to invest in a certain domain. And this you cannot just say, oh, Fukushima happened yesterday, tomorrow you're going to work on this, right? But politicians think sort of relatively short term, if I may say, right? And the public sort of is led around by the media and the politicians. So, okay, what do researchers want? Well, usually they want to have fun, right? I mean, you ask any researcher what he or she wants to do, he or she will say, what I'm doing is the most important thing in the world, just give me the money so I can do it. That's mostly, let me have fun. But in the end, the researchers want to have impact, okay? And if I think about mix, so that's my private opinion, right? I'm not allowed to say anything, on behalf of the National Science Foundation. I think mix had an effect, which I call the phase transition. Because we went from a period where we had relatively traditional communications, computer science research, and from one day to the next, essentially, we said, let's look at self-organized systems, scaling laws, etc. Completely different type of research. And we pulled everybody together, and we did it, right? And this, if you would look at the publications, at the impact, at the industrial interaction, there is a phase transition, and that phase transition was done by actually done by the effect of putting an NCCR here at EPFL together with Zurich and other partners at that point in time, right? And to do a phase transition is not easy, right? Most research is evolutionary. Okay, you give me a little bit more money, I'll prove more theorems per month, right? And or more experiments or whatever, right? Okay, and then of course we should learn from the physicists, right? Because they explain you very well that whatever they do will provoke a phase transition. Okay, but the ticket is quite larger than what we do. Okay, so let me finish by, I had half an hour, so I'm roughly on time. About what I call the magic triangle of information, computation, communication. So that's really the answer to the question, the future of ICT. I don't know the future of ICT, but what I know is that the people working in this field have a bunch of tools that are extremely powerful. Okay, and I call this the DNA of the field, which is funny because I made this slide, and then yesterday I sat in this fantastic talk by David Shea, who takes classic communication theory, information theory, and looks at DNA sequencing, right? Says, oh, but this is a channel, it's a special channel, let me calculate the capacity, what is the lower bound, blah, 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 okay? And you can see that with the tools we have, we can walk over to some other problem and solve it in a proper way, okay? And just before coming here, there are 3 parallel workshops going on at EPFL, which is a good thing, but sort of makes you run around the campus. There was Pravin Varaya in a meeting on transportation studies, right? Pravin Varaya is a colleague, a former colleague of mine at Berkeley. He's a control theory guy, and he went into communication networks. Now he works on transportation, right? And I sat through a few talks, and then Pravin came, and he properly posed the problem and solved it, right? And previously it was a bunch of, whatever, right? And so the tools we have in computer science, electrical engineering, communication, information theory, and so on, are extremely powerful. And if we take the plunge and walk outside of our comfort zone, we can actually have much higher impacts than what we think. Okay, good. So I also think we have a perspective that is very particular. So one is this one, right? If we tell anybody figure 1 of Shannon 1948, people know exactly what we mean, right? But we should actually explain this a little bit better. What I think is that we have a way to look at problems that is quite different from physicists or from natural scientists, right? And this way, which has to do with stochastic modeling, which has to do with that zero error capacity is 0, things like this is extremely powerful, and we should be very proud of these tools, and we should use them to the benefit of the rest of sciences. Okay, so let me finish here. Okay, so obviously it's going to end in the apéro. So the really long view on ICC is very simple. So this is actually not a true story. At least Wikipedia says it's apocryphal, but I had heard it before. Apocryphally, obviously. Heisenberg was asked what he would ask God given the opportunity. His reply was, when I meet God, I'm going to ask him 2 questions. Why relativity and why turbulence? I really believe he will have an answer for the first. Okay, so I thought actually it was Kolmogorov that asked this question, right? Because Kolmogorov, did some big contributions to turbulence. So as you know, turbulence is a very, very tricky problem. You see it every day, you have it in front of you. but nobody really understands it, and it's so, you know, complex and involved that, you know, a smart guy like Heisenberg said, relativity is a piece of cake compared to turbulence. So my question really is that we should try to think what Turing or Shannon would have asked God if they met him, right? And what would be the question? Would it be P versus NP, right? Well, it didn't exist when Turing did Turing machines. It's a later question, but it's certainly one of the questions that people would be very interested to ask, right? There are, you know, Wolfram would say, is the universe a computer, right? Is everything just the result of a program? Or, you know, people here on campus would say, what is consciousness? But what's interesting is that, you know, if you think of these questions, well, the sky is the limit. You know, we can get as much funding from the National Science Foundation as we could ever get and have fun. Okay, thanks very much.